Finally, it's a beautiful day in Wyoming, the sun's shining and the wind's not blowing, and you want to get outside and start planting your garden. But when you walk outside, you aren't quite sure what you've got and you want to get started. We would hope that your garden looks something like this, which is well tilled and ready to be planted. But oftentimes, our gardens have a tendency to look like this, which is a little bit weedy, and you've got to take care of things before you get going. So over the next several weeks, please join us as we explore the different weed types and how to control them, whether it's in a garden setting, in your lawn, or in your flower beds. This is Jeff Edwards for the University of Wyoming Cooperative Extension Service from the ground up.
Here it is mid-February, and many places in Wyoming are seeing annual weeds. An annual weed is a weed that comes from a seed head every year. Many times they'll pop up right through the snow. One of the best ways to control annual weeds is with a pre-emergent. A pre-emergent, when applied, actually stops the seed head from germination. As with all chemicals, it's important to apply the chemical according to label. We apply a thin layer along this trail, and you can see with this quarter on top of this piece of paper about what it's supposed to look like on top of the soil. These weeds that you can see here, it's too late to apply the pre-emergent. They've already germinated. There are, however, lots of weeds still going to come. It's important to remember that if we're going to use a pre-emergent, we have to apply it before the seed head germinates. So get on out there and chase those weeds down. This is Hudson Hill, University of Wyoming Cooperative Extension Service from the ground up. This week we're talking about weeds. When we look at weeds in our landscape, we really try to identify them into three different groups. 1, annuals, 2, biennials, and 3, perennials. We can also break those down into grasses and broadleaf weeds. The reason we do this is as we identify them, it better helps us control what's on our landscape. When we look at annuals, we look at a plant that creates lots of seeds every year and then starts from the seed the next year. When we talk about biennials, we talk about a plant that starts from a seed, creates a good root, then the next year jumps up and makes lots of seeds like these two plants here. A perennial is really hard to manage because of the extensive root system that it creates. Here's an example of a perennial that's always there, and we really have to work on that root system that it develops and makes it really hard to take care of in our landscapes. So this week, go out and look at the weeds that you have in your landscapes. Try to identify them into one of the three groups. Next week, we'll be talking about control of weeds in your landscapes. This is Hudson Hill, University of Wyoming Cooperative Extension Service from the ground up. For several segments, we've been talking about weeds. The reason we talk about weeds is because we don't want them. The definition of a weed is something that grows somewhere where it's not wanted. Today we're going to talk about control, and specifically today we'll be talking about mechanical control. We break that into three areas, basically pulling the weed, cutting the weed, or burying the weed. When we talk about pulling the weed, it works really well with our annual weeds. We simply pull and remove the weed. So when we talk about cutting the weed, we're taking an instrument and removing the weed, removing some of the root, making that weed so it can't grow as well. This works really well when we are talking about biennial and perennial weeds. Because of the root system that they have, we need to remove some of that. When we use burying as a mechanical control, we're basically hoeing or tilling the garden and putting soil on top of the plant. What this does is it doesn't allow the plant to get the sunlight. No longer will it be able to use photosynthesis. Remember, if we're mechanically controlling weeds and those weeds have seeds on them, we want to remove them from the environment. If we don't, we'll get more exercise next year. This is Hudson Hill, University of Wyoming Cooperative Extension Service from the ground up.
Even though we've had a cold, wet spring this year, we've had enough warm days and plenty of moisture for several of the different weed species to have bloomed and already be setting seed. Many of the weeds that are blooming and setting seed right now are annuals. They have very shallow root systems, so they're easy to pull. And the best thing you can do is to get out there and pull them. Make sure that you get them into a trash bag and off to the landfill. Our temptation is to get out the chemical sprayer and spray these weeds, and it will kill the plant, but killing the plant doesn't necessarily kill the seeds. Each of these plants has germinated from one seed, and they have multiple seeds on each one. This plant here may have over 100 seeds. And in order to ensure that those seeds don't germinate or blow into another neighbor's yard and germinate there, you want to get them into a trash bag, and that's why we want to send them to the landfill. For the University of Wyoming Cooperative Extension Service, this has been Donna Quinn from the ground up.
In the last several segments, we've been talking about weeds and their control, and now it's time to actually go somewhere and choose a specific herbicide for the weed that you're trying to control. So when you come to a retail location, how do you choose what type of herbicide that you need for your particular problem? You certainly don't choose by the color of the bottle. In order to choose the correct product, you really need to understand what type of weed you have in your yard, and I can't emphasize this enough, you need to read the label on the product. This particular product will control grasses in your flower beds, and these particular products will control a wide variety of weeds in your lawn. In order to have a successful weed control program, you need to match the right herbicide with the weed that you have in either your lawn or in your flower beds. If you need further help in identifying the weeds that you have, please contact your local Cooperative Extension office. I'm Jeff Edwards for the University of Wyoming Cooperative Extension Service from the ground up.
A lot of wonderful spring rains this year compared to the last several, and it's encouraging everything to grow well, including our weeds. And it's best if we can get on top of them and get them under control early on, but every once in a while we have to rely on chemicals for that control. This herbicide has an active ingredient of glyphosate. It will begin to kill weeds within 1 or 2 hours, and everything should be dead within 2 weeks. This brown dormant grass here is an ornamental grass that we want to keep in the garden, but it's got an actively growing green grassy weed in the middle. It's a perfect example of a time to use glyphosate for control. It won't damage the grass that we want to keep, but it'll kill the grass that's growing in the middle. Now, on any breezy day, you'd want to put protection on anything around it that might get an overspray from the herbicide. Another situation where grasses become a problem is when they come up in the middle of our broadleaf garden flowers. The product that you want to look for when shopping to control them is fluazepam. It will control any grass-like or grassy plants in the middle of our broadleaf garden plants without harming the flowers. However, you do need to be careful when you spray it around irises, lilies, and tulips because they have grass-like leaves. In the middle of grass, if you have a broadleaf weed like this dandelion, you could use glyphosate to control it, but you'd end up with a dead spot where everything was killed like this one here. So the better product would be to use 2,4-D, which kills only the broadleaf weeds. There are lots of products on the market to control weeds in your yard. If you want to control anything green that you might spray it on, you could look for glyphosate. If you want to control grassy weeds in your broadleaf flowers, look for fluazepam. And if you want to control broadleaf weeds in your grass, look for 2,4-D. For the University of Wyoming Cooperative Extension Service, this has been Donna Quinn from the ground up.
In the last several segments, we've been spending some time talking about weeds and their control. And the next logical step is actually chemical control of the weeds. But the single most important aspect of control is reading and following the label. When I'm reviewing the label, the first section that I look for is the personal protective equipment section. And that tells me exactly what I need to wear in order to safely handle this product. Generally, the items that are required are long sleeve shirt, shoes, socks, long pants, and on most products that's enough, but certain products you need to have safety glasses. It might require you to use rubber gloves or rubber boots. Manufacturers also recommend that you launder your clothing separately from your family laundry in order to keep your family safe. Using pesticides according to the label can be a very effective weed control tool. You don't have to fear the product, but you need to have a healthy respect for it. This is Jeff Edwards for the University of Wyoming Cooperative Extension Service from the ground up.
Weeds are an issue that we face in all landscapes. One of the most difficult weeds to control are perennial weeds. Perennial weeds are those weeds that come back year after year. The thing that allows them to come back year after year is their extensive root system. These plants in the fall after the first frost store sugars from their leaves into the roots. This is an excellent time to apply chemicals. Chemicals applied after the first frost will move through the leaves and into the roots, helping to control these difficult weeds. This is Hudson Hill, University of Wyoming Cooperative Extension Service.